how that works out. My many warnings regarding weed, however, are much less straightforward and far more faceted, because I don't want to be a hypocrite and because that conversation is necessarily more philosophical. I believe that marijuana is not for children, and as the associate publisher of High Times magazine, I know something about the subject. I think it should be an honorable, widespread activity among responsible adults, like sex or driving a car. I tell my young daughter that she could undoubtedly switch on the engine, put it in gear, and might even get someplace. But without that necessary judgment that comes with experience, she might very well cause a terrible accident along the way that will hurt her or hurt someone else. Then I warn her about driving. I tell her of the bashilong. In the 19th century, at the time of the dissolution of the great Luba Empire in Central Africa, a number of smaller kingdoms emerged. The Baluba chief, Kalamba Mukengi, subjugated neighboring tribes at gunpoint and, struggling to unify his new confederation, ordered all the ancient fetishes to be burned in public, and in their place instituted the Bantu custom of smoking hemp to reincarnate the soul. The Baluba men gathered around the fire in the center of the village each night and solemnly smoked cannabis from a huge calabash, and a tribal offender was publicly punished by being forced to smoke hemp until he lost consciousness. A tribal faction within this new coalition, the aggressive Bashilonga, led by Moamba Umput, established the Ben Riamba cult, the so-called Sons of Hemp, who quickly put down their spears and forswore their warlike ways. The Sons of Hemp quickly gained many followers. The Bashilonga became less violent, began to treat with other tribes, and made more laws. The land of the hemp smokers along the banks of the Lulua River began to be called Lubuku, which is translated as friendship, and the partisans of Riamba were widely known as friends, and greeted each other with the Bashilongan word for life, moio. It's a pretty tale as far as it goes, but not all was perfect in paradise. Bashilongan women were not allowed to smoke hemp and were consigned to work in the fields, keep the house, and raise the children, while the men made cloth, went hunting, or, for the most part, smoked hemp and talked with incredible fluency. I urge my daughter and our listeners to remember the Bashilong. The homespun philosopher Yogi Berra, who knew something about baseball, famously observed that it ain't over till it's over, which reminds us that anything can happen. It's possible, I suppose, that marijuana reform could be repealed instead of marijuana law, but I have my doubts because we've mitigated the hype and because Americans can no longer afford to ignore the billions of dollars in tax revenue that marijuana law reform will provide. While I personally believe that legalizing cannabis would encourage a more civilized society, I also recognize that reasonable people can disagree. That's why this book is so timely and important. There are overblown claims on both sides of the equation, and we need to have the more disciplined discourse that philosophy provides. Philosophy, at its best, is the art of reason tempered by the science of thought, and our conversations regarding cannabis need to be more reasonable, more thoughtful, and more civilized, now more than ever. This book is a good place to start. We stand before a locked door or a dangerous precipice. You are free to choose your own metaphor. But whichever you prefer, one thing seems clear. We are about to turn the key or take the jump. Before we do, let's think about that. Preface.